Hi, Holly. How are you?
I'm good, Brandon. How's it going?
I'm doing well. Yeah, it's been an interesting week. Having my little getaways here and there. So
Yeah.
I need my sunshine as well. So I came south, getting a little sun, visiting my mom. I have an older dog, and so I wanted to come spend some time with her too. Things are a little rough there.
Oh,
So I think it's important to, put these things in perspective, like death and aging and things like that. I think a lot of people have a tough time, and I think it's really important to value life and to really prioritize those things of, when there's things that are animals or people that are
sure.
special to us, it's important to go spend some time with them and really soak that up and be present. So yeah, it's something I've prioritized this week. And so how's your week been?
It's been pretty good. Not in a warm, sunny place, visiting family.
Hmm.
Yeah, still kind of in the throes of Midwest spring here in Wisconsin. So it's sunny
Yeah, yeah.
today, but yeah,
The sunshine's nice, but then you get out there and
40.
it's not so nice.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to be getting into the language of survival. Essentially, this is going to be polarized thinking, all or none, us against them, catastrophizing. It's just when we're under stress, generally our mindset tends to go negative. A lot of this work is so important to be revisiting situations, stressful events, so that we can bring them to a better place. That's how we balance out the mind. And where we can show present to situations as well. We're not carrying past baggage into them. That's one of the main themes we have here, or for our goals for Permission Evolve, is to really help people unpack that past baggage. And really the way we talk to ourselves is it's a pretty accurate reflection of what we're still holding on to. It really colors our reality a lot. It's the voice in our head, the things we're telling ourselves when we go to do whatever we're going to do, that has a huge impact on performance, how we show up. Well, whether we see opportunities in our lives or not. If I feel hopeless, disempowered, there's not much hope for change there. And with that lens, I'm not going to be seeing the gifts and the blessings around me as well. It's one of those interesting things where we can all get caught in a negative mindset. And it's interesting how if you're removed from that or outside of that, it's easier to see solutions for that person than they can see themselves, right? That's one of those main things with coaching or a mentor or somebody that can help guide us through these challenges, because when we're in that negative state, it can be so difficult to see anything different. And so this language is super important because, if it's shame based thinking, if we're putting limits on ourselves, that's generally going to get us stuck in these repetitive patterns where we don't see a way out. A lot of this work is unpacking shame, trying to figure out how I can see these situations differently. It's to develop a more self compassionate view of myself and those around me. So the deeper I understand this, the more I can shift out of survival and focus on that brighter future, which is a main component we're regularly talking about. Any thoughts on this for you, Holly?
Yeah, it's funny you bring up the coaching, helping people see things differently. Just this morning, in fact, I was chatting with a couple friends and talking about how important it is to have somebody who can maybe help see your life from, let's say, 30,000 feet. When you're like down sitting in the weeds and maybe can't see everything that's possible, that part of coaching or having a mentor or something like that is super helpful just to gain that perspective. So I think plays into this for sure. And then when we think about the language associated with negativity, we've touched on this in other podcasts before, but that's some of that inner critic voice coming
Mhm.
through.
It's really this voice of our past, right? And that's the thing. So we can stay stuck in our own loops, or, through mindfulness practices, all we're trying to do is we're trying to create some space. So we're detaching from that loop so we can see the problems differently. The narrative we're telling ourselves about the experiences we've had, that really does make up our reality. And so if we're going to shift things, we have to change that story. And so we have to start to develop some self-compassion and let ourselves off the hook for maybe things we've done wrong, mistakes we've made, and also giving other people the benefit of the doubt as much as possible so we can free ourselves up from that bitterness and resentfulness and things like that. That's really what gets us stuck, is there's an aspect of ourselves that's locked in the past. The first kind of frame here is what is survival mode. So survival mode is where we're basically fixated on meeting our basic needs. And this generally comes from early on in life. Maybe we were in very stressful situations, or maybe we're trying to make our way in the world today. And maybe in that 20s age range,
Sure.
there's a lot of struggles that happen there of trying to figure out how to make your way. So money becomes a hyper focus generally. Also, we all have this desire for, validation and approval from others, especially caregivers, authority figures, things like that. We start to become focused on how do I win somebody's approval? And that's going to be based on a feeling of lack. So survival mode is, we're lacking something. That becomes our primary driver, primary motivation. So we can't be super dialed into purpose or this bigger vision if we're stuck in this trying to meet those basic needs. And a lot of those are actually emotional needs along with physical needs. You'll see this a lot with people where maybe moving into 30s where somebody hasn't like found a partner yet in a relationship where that becomes this driving force that's like filtered through everything of like, oh, I need to find a relationship. That's actually survival mode. That's the scarcity mindset of
Sure.
I'm never going to find somebody or everybody out there sucks or whatever it is.
Yeah.
We know that when we're in these modes of trying to meet basic needs, it can be very black and white thinking, all or none. We lack nuance or context for situations, and we just go to these blanket generalizations. What that does is it's like, well, my mind it's driven to help me get what I want. Whatever I focus on, that's what I'm feeding energy into and that's what I'm building. If I adopt these beliefs, these ideas that are very limiting, that are isolating, that separate me from other people, like they cause all these disconnects. If that's the program I'm running, that's really going to be my experience. That is that need for outside support to kind of shine a light on, hey, like you're pretty intense in this area. There's a lot of struggles, but it's just like a lot of these things aren't life and death for most people. And of course, those things do exist, but a lot of these things are very emotionally based.
Can we do some specific examples of this? Like I know, so you touched on the dating aspect, right? So the idea
Mhm.
of like all or none, like all men suck or all women are needy or I make it up, right? But what would be
Yeah.
like specific examples of that where it's not life and death, but it can feel like it when you're in it or when you're in that
Mhm.
scarcity mode?
Well, it could be stemming from, let's say there's like abandonment. Let's say emotional abandonment's a big one. So if I don't feel supported properly by somebody, or yeah, let's say that could even be financially. Let's say I'm not getting my needs met there. I'm going to feel alone and isolated. And that's going to also create some of these intense negative thoughts like I'm never going to make it, or nobody loves me, or nobody supports me. We start to shift into those ideas. And we could have people around us that do show us love on a regular basis, that do support us on a regular basis. But if I'm tapped into those tapes, I can't recognize that. You'll notice with survival mode, we do become very self-absorbed, meaning we're kind of the center of the universe. If we're fixated on negative thinking, it's we can see a lot of entitlement here as well of let's say I was betrayed or somebody hurt me in a specific way. Now I might want to inflict that pain onto other people. I might want to I might feel like I deserve things that I didn't work for or that I haven't like created in my life. There's so many different offshoots to this, but when I become this, we commonly call it like narcissism,
Sure.
whereas I'm just like so self-absorbed. Basically, if you're in that place and it's an extreme version, but I'm viewing everything around me as like objects that are there to help meet my needs. So that gives me a free pass from a moral or ethical standpoint of whatever I do is justified because I'm in so much pain and I deserve these things. So it can create like that entitlement. My my goals or my dreams or my desires are more important than everybody else's. And so I can walk all over everybody else. I'm entitled because there's kind of this grandiose idea in that instance of oneself. And so there isn't a healthy respect for the people around you. There's not a healthy balance to, giving and receiving. It's like more of in the taking mindset. That is very survival oriented, but generally those are things that are stemming just their emotional wounds. It's not like somebody's actually fending for their lives, right? It's
Right.
like more of I have emotional abandonment issues or I don't feel like I was loved by my caregivers or whatever it is. And so it makes a lot of things justified, which is generally negative behaviors. That's one of those aspects of this. It's, well, if I'm in survival, then okay, survival is all that matters. That's how our mind is wired. It's like we have to check that box first before we can start to get to higher functioning. The brain it's layered in our conscious mind, and then there's the emotional mind, and then there's survival. We basically have to check those boxes to get to conscious thinking. Okay. We have to meet survival needs, and then we have to meet emotional needs. And then once I'm there, now I have things to really offer other people where I'm not trying to manipulate situations. I'm not wrapped up in emotions. I can be more rational and objective, and I can be more present as well because I'm not plugged into these basic human needs. We know we're there when our thinking is extreme, when it is all or none. It's everything's the end of the world, us versus them. We see this a lot politically today. It's two distinct separations, and then there's tons of judgments thrown in there. But all these situations are lacking nuance. It's lacking context, and they're highly emotionally charged. Now, yeah, we have like enemies. We have it's polarized thinking, and it doesn't have to be that way. But the main idea here is we're plugged into something that we think is a threat to our life. Most of these situations aren't actually that anymore. Yes, that does exist, but the vast majority of things going on today, they're polarized emotions. It's not life and death scenarios. So our mind is operating out of life and death. If I'm bringing survival into a situation, I'm not bringing my best self. I just need to take care of myself, and that's all that matters. And it doesn't matter what anybody else has going on. It's all or none thinking. It's catastrophizing. So everything becomes the end of the world or the slightest inconvenience. We've talked about this before. If I'm catastrophizing something, that just means there's a lot of pain there for me. These are all clues that there's something unresolved within me. And the intensity of the emotions just is going to tell us like what we carry around that situation. So maybe I felt like I had to betray myself in order to exist in a certain, we could say like a religious setting or something like that, right? Or it could be to function properly in school. I had to go along with things that I didn't agree with, or it's all these kind of trade-offs that we have where it's created pain within us. And then we didn't have the coping mechanisms to navigate through that pain effectively. And so parts of us get stuck at this younger version when everything is a big deal. We talked about this the other day. The catastrophizing, the prototypical situation here is like a high school breakup. You lost your first love and it's the end of the world and you're never going to recover from it, right? Like, and
Yeah.
we've all been through that, but that's the level of the mind we're working at. Is with time and space, you start to realize different things, that maybe this person wasn't perfect in every way. Maybe there's a better compliment out there for me. Like those types of things. As you gain experience, you start to see how things are more similar than different. You start to see that there's always a path forward, that the things that used to be very difficult for you are pretty easy now. That's what the growth process is. It's the recognition that in the grand scheme of things, how many things are actually end of the world scenarios, actually such a big deal. And if we're feeling those emotions, that's a clue that there's some of that stuff locked away in my past that I haven't addressed. The magnitude I'm showing up with the situation is way bigger than it actually is. And so I'm actually out of touch with reality. I'm bringing a past version of myself that's very wounded to the table. I'm not going to be very resourceful from that place. What does this do? Well, it can make us a miserable person. It can make
Sure.
us not be joyful to be around. It can make us the self-absorbed, meaning I'm not reciprocating in relationships. So it can damage things. Everything is just like whatever's going on in my life is more important than what's going on in everybody else's life. I think we've all experienced people functioning from that place where it just becomes very one-sided at a certain point. It makes us tough to have conversations. If I'm in this survival place and I have a lot of wounds I haven't dealt with, there's going to be an anxious, nervous energy I'm bringing to conversations where I can't connect with other people because I might be triggered by so many things that the other person feels like they have to walk on eggshells when they're talking to me. That can affect relationships there. It creates all these like landmines that we have to navigate rather than this like healthy respect that we all have this personal history, we all have preferences, we all have opinions on things, and there's common ground to find everywhere, but we do become super polarized, and then it's very limiting because then we start to wall off our life. We'd be like, oh, I'm only going to associate with maybe people that think exactly like me, or maybe I'm not going to put myself out there. Like, let's say if I'm dating, like, and I'm just going to operate from this, all of these people suck, so I'm not even going to try anymore. So we start shutting things down. It's these limits, it's these isolations, and it's also this separation, meaning I can't connect with other people effectively unless they have the same exact view as me in many ways. I think one of the important things with relationship is this idea of being a complement, which is people balance each other out. That takes different viewpoints, different perspective, different energies. If I need everybody to be just like me, then I'm going to have a hard time. It's this ability to appreciate other people for what they bring to the table or learn something new in that process. And that's saying survival is this very ego mindset where we think we know it all. We think we have it all figured out. There's no other way to think, like those types of things. When we're talking about compliments, it is just this being open to new ideas, and we have to be able to open the mind from that place. And
Right.
so we have to be checking the safety and security box. We have to be checking the emotional box of it's safe for me to receive new information. With coaching, that's kind of the name of the game. You have a problem, you bring it to the table, and we try to see it differently. You have to have an open mind to do this work. You have to consider the fact that the way you're looking at it is bringing a lot of stress and that you haven't found your way through it. Finding your way through it is going to be about seeing the problems differently. It's going to be about navigating the situation differently. It's going to be different behaviors, the way I show up. So all these things they're very linked where when we're in survival, we do just run from these repetitive patterns over and over again. That all stems from this narrative, this language we're using with ourselves that just keeps us operating in predictable patterns because that's what's known. That does just kind of create this very small life. It creates a life where we're not connecting with new types of people, where we're very isolated, and that might be safe, but that's not in our nature in terms of like checking the happiness box. It's generally because we're closed off. We want to be in this expanded state where we trust ourselves to navigate situations effectively based on having this open mind and consistently learning new things and also challenging our own narrative about things that are if something's making me miserable, like it would serve me to try and see that differently. If I just think about it and it just makes me feel worse and worse, like if I stay there, I might spiral into a depression. You're kind of poisoning yourself at that point. And we all have these things that we get stuck on, but it's just knowing that if we stay there, that's going to be damaging to us. If we want to move forward, I have to start to question what I'm telling myself about the situation. And a lot of times politically, we get too focused on world events that are out of our control and our power, right?
Right.
I can just like spin and think about, oh, all these terrible things that are happening that I have like zero direct influence or impact over. And that's making you miserable. And in that process, it could make somebody very judgmental and it creates all this separation and isolation again. So we always want to bring it back to the individual. We always want to get back connected to how can you feel good about what you've got going on in your life? If there are things that are meaningful to you, what are some steps you can take to assert some influence over that in a manageable way, right?
Yeah.
Because you're just one person. How do I expand my influence? How do I do these things? That's going to be expanding to a broader view, not getting super self-absorbed, right?
Right.
Not just focusing on our survival needs. The expansion comes from this broader point of view of our life, meaning I'm depersonalizing all these things because that's all I've really done is I've taken a painful thing and I've made it my rule for living, which is what a belief is. Now I don't even question it. I just run programs based on that idea over and over again. And that's where I'm going to keep getting the same results. Anytime that gets challenged, now I'm going to get triggered. That once again continues to perpetuate and feed these ideas that we're talking about, the separation, the isolation, the limitation, all those things.
One of the things you made me think of as you were talking through all of that is the fundamental attribution error concept, which is the idea that, especially if you're looking for connection, as you've talked through the political separation, that's one way, right? And the idea behind the fundamental attribution error is that you give yourself the benefit of the doubt in terms of your intention, but not other people. And so how
Yeah.
can we give that grace or that sort of space for other people to also have good intentions, even if they are different from us. So as you were going
Mhm.
through that, I was really thinking about that concept quite a bit.
Yeah, that is an interesting idea. The more compassionate we are with ourselves, the more we can extend that to others. But we talked about it last week in the podcast where a lot of the things that trigger us are things that we used to do. So I've grown, evolved, and I changed, but like I've shamed that aspect of me, the younger version of me, that more immature version that operated a certain way. I shame that part of myself for being that way at one point. That's now what I'm projecting on other people. I'm not compassionate with that version of myself, basically. So we see this, it's super common. We're judging other people for things we used to do because we've locked it away in shame. And we may not function that way anymore, but that part of ourself is still locked in shame. And so once again, that's one of these ideas that where we get stuck because I haven't I haven't given that part of myself of that pass yet. I haven't developed that compassion around that issue because once I do, now I can interact with somebody exhibiting the same behavior and I have understanding now. So I'm not going to, that's a balanced perspective. I'm not going to have this intense negative judgment coming because I've handled my own shame around it. I think that's commonly what would happen there is, and also it's like if we see somebody else outside of ourselves as a threat to us in some way, and it could just mean a threat to our beliefs, we're going to put our defenses up. That's where judgment comes in. That's where all these things are, is this person's a threat to me in some way. It puts our system on high alert and then we become externally focused. So this person's the problem and I need to protect myself from that. That can activate a lot of negative thinking as well. And that would be very survival oriented.
So if we're really finding ourselves in that black and white place or really polarized thinking of it's all good, it's all bad, one, what can it sound like? And two, what can be like impacts of kind of being in that space?
Well, yeah. I mean, first, what it's going to sound like is, pessimism is a good one.
Sure.
It's going to be all or none. We're going to notice that there's no middle ground. There's just simply, and if I have a survival attached to something, um, I am operating in a limiting belief. This is something that I believe is absolutely true, like without a shadow of a doubt. And I've seen it so many times in my own personal life that I don't see it any other way. So I've had to develop protection mechanisms based on that. We are going to be very judgmental from that place. We're not going to be able to move off of our opinion at all, or we're not going to be able to consider other people's point of view. So it is just like a very kind of shut down, for lack of a better word, kind of like a know-it-all energy. Because like I'm so sure about this, maybe I've built that into part of my identity. This is kind of where, identity stuff is interesting and why I think it's better to have kind of a broader identity rather than going all in on one idea. Because what if I build all my beliefs and ideas around a certain thing and then I realize that that's not right for me anymore?
Yeah.
Now my entire life is built on something that I don't even believe anymore. That's a sticky place where, we might feel like we're living a lie. We're going to get more reactive from that place. That would kind of perpetuate being miserable because I don't even know how to find my way out of this anymore. That's why I prefer the idea of phases rather than like, this is like, oh, like I'm going through a phase rather than like, this is me completely and there's no other way. Because what that basically means, if we try to shift out of that, we would lose all the people around us that also identify the same way. We wouldn't know who we are without those things. And that would be an identity crisis. And I would say that when we're dealing with the mind and the ego, this can be like extremely intense. Like it could be, I don't know what to do with my life anymore. It could mean like, I don't want to be here anymore, like that kind of stuff, because everything gets like scrambled.
Do you find that that kind of thinking can also be the we've always done it this way kind of thinking? So we keep
Yeah.
doing it. It's the same year over year or month over month or whatever it
Mhm.
is because that's how we've always done it.
It's, by and large, people are resistant to change unless you're changing regularly. And that's why one of the cool things about this work is it's this regular change that's happening. As long as you're questioning and shifting out of things, any stuck energy, it is going to be repetitive thought. It's going to be repetitive patterns. And that's actually like anti-life. That's like moving, because everything in life is supposed to be growing. But then basically we're shutting it down. Hey, this is the way it's always going to be. It can never be any different. And so that kind of like kills off any growth energy, right? And so yeah, that's very limiting. But this has worked before, or this is safe. Okay, those are kind of the ideas that a survival mind is running on. It can be like we're trying to save ourselves from embarrassment or something like that. I'm going to keep doing what I've always done because this has gotten me by, and it maybe hasn't drawn negative attention before. I may just be doing those repetitive patterns because like I'm afraid to put myself out there in a new way. Maybe I'm insecure, those types of things. But that's the thing. So we'll see this with a lot of people mentally, emotionally don't seem to grow past the high school, college age. So whatever they enjoy doing at one level, you can see them in their 30s and 40s, and it might be like kind of a similar idea going on. They just might be older. So that's like a little bit of being stuck in the past. Of a lot of people associate those time periods as like the best time of your life. So now there's not really this brighter future happening. So survival could actually be like, I need to like maintain this way of being as long as possible. And there's a point where that it's just kind of like, to other people that have maybe passed that stage, it's kind of weird. It's just like, why are you still functioning from that? The longer it
The
goes
longer
on.
it goes.
Okay. Yeah. So it's this predictable pattern. It's also, I internalize about those situations. Yeah. Many people do have a hard time moving forward in life and making these transitions. It is a maturation process. That's what all this is like, I'm taking my mindset and my emotions from a younger age, and I'm trying to bring them up to speed with who I am now. There's this gap that happens if we're not continually reassessing and we're working through these things. My mindset might be, it'll be like context based, where, maybe around money, like if there's a lot of financial stress growing up, my mindset around money might be very immature because it was painful. It locked these beliefs into my nervous system that were very stressful and very limiting. My mindset relative to that might be stuck way in the past. So upgrading is, how do I want to operate? What are my goals? What adjustments do I need to make mentally and emotionally that are going to line me up with that? It's going to be a maturing process of like, I'm going to bring this from this immature mindset about it, which is all or none thinking, polarized, lacks nuance, catastrophizing, those types of things. So we're going to be stuck in that. If we're going to grow, we have to get that part of us up to speed. That's going to be, what would somebody that's exceptional at this, or what's somebody that's mature about this, what would they be thinking? How would they see these situations? And it's going to be more of this balanced perspective. It's going to be, I'm going to have a broader view. I'm not going to be hyper focused on one little problem. I'm going to be able to see how all these different things work together. And that's what experience brings. And wisdom is you start to see the interconnectedness of everything. Scientifically, we like to isolate the variable. That kind of trains our mind to be, if I fix this, the problem will be fixed. But no, it's like, if you fix that, then, there might be a problem down the line, because it's like everything's kind of this holistic thing. If we're just trying to isolate things, there's another part that's being neglected. And so we create a mature perspective, one that has wisdom, it's going to see how all the pieces work together. We see this with the body. In the medical field, it's like, oh, we'll give a pill for this, but then it's going to create a side effect. So is there a solution where everything starts to improve rather than I'm making sacrifices? But if we can look at the big picture, we can make adjustments all across the board, and then they're going to start to work together.
Yeah. It's the interdependent or interconnected way of thinking, which
Mhm.
is, that can be really uncomfortable.
Well, yeah, I mean, because the logical, analytical mind is very attracted to that. The problem's here, so I'm going to work on it. But the problem could be actually coming from something way over there. We need that balanced perspective. Sometimes that works, and also that might provide us immediate relief, but long term, we probably need a different approach. So all these things, generally, the longer you do the isolating, like the more other things fall further out of alignment. Over time, things get worse and worse. It's having this broader perspective. If we see our language being, if I'm very analytical, if that's me basically scanning my environment for threats constantly and trying to predict the future and trying to plan too much. And so that's another clue that I need to have. I'm trying to control all these different variables. That's a lack of trust. That's like I'm trying to protect myself from something rather than I'm going to allow things to happen and then I'm going to adjust accordingly.
That can definitely be really hard to give up that sort of worst case scenario planning and just to allow
Well, and
things to happen.
there's certain things that's just like, well, okay, if this has been a problem in the past, I want to give that some attention. I want to unpack it. I want to learn about it. And then I want to integrate that information. And that's how I can trust myself more in the future because I've done that work. Because usually, like, okay, if planning is like, I'm going to do this, what's been a problem in my past? If I have anxiety around that, the past thing, that's probably what needs to work actually, because that's what doesn't allow me to trust myself is something happened and I never did the work to unpack it. I commonly do this with athletes going into a race or competition. What are the situations that have happened where you either failed or feel like you could have done better or something unexpected happened that you weren't prepared for? And if it happens to us and we don't learn the lesson from it, basically that experience is useless because it's actually has a negative effect on us. If I didn't do that work to learn about what I could have done better, now it's like I'm actually bringing anxiety into the future because I didn't learn about the lesson. So I have this gap in my knowledge now, and I'm continuing to try and move forward. But every time I go to move forward, my mind is trying to warn me about the thing that happened in the past. So I can't relax when I go to do that in the competition now. It's like I'm worried about that going wrong again because I didn't clean that up.
I don't have a specific personal example to me, but can imagine something, I don't know, let's say a crash, bike crash or
Yeah.
something like that, right?
Yeah, I've worked with numerous triathletes now that have had bike crashes. And so, that's the thing, it's a trauma. And so there's a lot of complex emotions involved. And what the mind does is it takes a snapshot of all the possible things that I could have done to prevent it. It's usually chopped up and doesn't make much sense. And so, that's kind of what PTSD is. It's like our mind's like stuck in the event because it's trying to figure out what could I have done differently. And so we want to do that work. We want to try and figure out like, okay, did I not trust myself? Did I hesitate? What led up to it? What emotional things did I have going on? Why was I distracted? Why was I not present? We start to look at all the variables to try and unpack it so that my nervous system can start to relax. Because if not, if it's left in that unresolved place and it was a very painful experience for me, I am going to be in that survival mode. My mind's going to be hyper alert. My heartbeat's going to speed up, like everything. I'm going to be scanning constantly. It's going to be eating up so much energy, which isn't efficient as an athlete, especially endurance athletes need to conserve energy. It puts us in this mode where we're burning up so much energy trying to figure out what do I need to protect myself against. If I gain the wisdom from the experience now and I integrate that, now I bring that with me. Okay, I know to be more aware of these things. I'm more dialed into this, I can be more present. And that's how we increase performance that way.
I don't know that you can tell me if this is not on topic, but it's sort of as you're talking through that, I was thinking about witnessing crashes and the anxiety of that witnessing something else happening. So I don't know exactly how that plays in terms of this language, but sometimes I think about that like it didn't necessarily happen to me, but I watched it happen and now I'm worried about it. For example, like I get very nervous moving bottles on my bike. This is a personal example because I watched
Mhm.
somebody in front of me crash because she was moving bottles on her bike.
Yeah. Well, and so that's it. Witnessing it, it is that kind of front row seat of, okay, this person did this wrong, and so that sticks with us. We learn the lesson. Is oh, maybe if I do that work, okay, how do I get to a place of being secure in this area? Do I need to practice this? What do I need to do about this? What else did that other person have going on that led up to that? They were probably distracted in other ways. There's probably bigger things going on that we're not aware of, right?
Sure.
It's just it witnessing trauma can be traumatic. If we see a car accident, if we see anything, it's that's because that's that empathy piece. That's like, oh, like I can't imagine that happening to me. We kind of actually like share the feeling a little bit. And so I think those are wake up calls or things that be like, I'm going to be more mindful in the future because I know that this is a potential. Okay. And that's the thing is it's like If something's like out of sight, it's out of mind usually. But if I see it now, it has that impact of like, this is a potential thing that could happen. It would serve me to do that work as well, to be like, okay, how can I be as prepared as possible? What variables can I control? How can I address those things so that I can do what I need to do if that situation were to present itself?
If we're looking for ways to get out of these situations that we've talked about, the limitations that we place on ourselves, either because of a situation that happened or the witnessing of a situation that happened, what are those tangible or tactical things that someone could start noticing or working on?
When we're talking about rewiring and shifting out of things, it is the first step is always kind of paying attention to how you feel because there's information stored there. And in internal dialogue wise, we want to spot the extremes. We want to start to look at like, where has my mind gone to this all or none thinking? Where am I speaking in absolutes? So this always happens. Those types of things. When there's no context, there's no nuance, that's where we know that I'm functioning from some sort of survival pattern. We could question it and say, is this actually true? That's an important exercise. We're interrupting our own pattern by asking bigger questions like, is this true or is this just what I feel right now? And if I feel this way, why do I feel this way? Where is this coming from? If we're feeling something, there's generally a personal history attached to it. If I'm carrying negative emotion around something, that's generally means that there's something unresolved to look at there. And so what does this remind me of? Those types of things. Or if it's like a person that triggers me, it's like what person do they remind me of from my past that was like an unsafe person or that maybe was functioning in survival and was in more of that kind of self-absorbed like narcissistic mode. We try to look for the clues. We're looking for context. We're looking for like, well, why does this bother me? What can I do about this? How can I unpack the emotions related to it? Because all these things we literally can reprogram. When we feel neutral about something, that means I'm at peace with it. That means I'm not trying to protect myself from it. If I'm feeling negative, that means there's a narrative I'm telling myself about that situation that tells me I have to protect myself, that it's unsafe, that, there's something that could go wrong here. And generally that's because something went wrong in our past around that idea and we haven't addressed it. So we've left it in that negative place. And a negative place means we didn't properly learn the lesson. So the next step is, we want to bring nuance to the situation. We want to replace always and never with sometimes or often. We start to shift our language to, yeah, like most of the time this is what I see, but there's room for nuance there. It's not always true. If I see it as most of the time, that means that I'm dialing it back from all the time. That's like giving me some wiggle room in my mindset to consider other possibilities, which I wasn't doing before. That in itself is growth. To be like, okay, my mind's not so fixed that it can't see this thing any differently.
Right.
So we want to reframe mistakes as information, not our identity. That's one of those things we're talking about. Like the identity is where we get trapped. We get stuck in these ideas of all or none. This is who I am. There's no other possibility. That in itself is what makes us stuck. If I'm just receiving feedback and I'm not personalizing it and attaching it to my identity, I can use that information however I'd like. What can I learn from this situation? Is there a way I can do it better? How can I improve upon it? How can I let this go? We can transform it if it's just energy or information that is depersonalized. And I just simply personalized it with my mind. And if I kept telling myself the same story over and over again, now that's when I make it my identity. So we're just trying to return nuance to it. And so that means a detachment from it. I'm detaching from the story I'm telling myself. And I'm considering that there are other possibilities that my mind is not hyper attuned to. If I'm fixated in these beliefs and it's the limitation, it's the all or none. Now I'm only looking for one potential thing and everything else is wrong. As I'm creating that wiggle room in my mind by adding that nuance, now I can see that there's other possibilities out there. Maybe because this isn't always true, maybe there's a belief that I can align with that would suit me better, that doesn't get me stuck so often or doesn't activate these triggers so often. And then the third piece is we want to expand our thinking. So we ask what else could be true, right? We're trying to get this broader view. This is where, a coach or a book or an inspirational person where we can see if we're struggling with a specific area, there's somebody doing it really well. Now I can be like, well, what did they do to develop that? Because I think when we're in survival thinking, we think that all these things just kind of happen. It's just a talent or there's no work behind it. Like somebody was just given something, right?
Comes easy to them.
That's
Yeah.
yeah, it's survival thing, but it's usually like thousands of hours of practice. It's very intensive stuff. They had a passion, they developed it. And there's exceptions to everything, but there's usually a path forward in every way, every instance. If I'm stuck and I'm stuck in a negative loop about something, I need to see different examples. I need to open my mind up to other possibilities. That allows me to create even more nuance. This person might be an exception, but they actually have this well-charted path of putting in all this work. Maybe I won't ever be as good as that person, but I can improve. I can get much further along than I am. It's kind of attaching to breaking our narratives of there's a way through this, there's a way out of this, there's a way to improve upon this. It's not fixed. We're just always trying to find that growth mindset of how can I view these things differently that are going to give me a better path forward. Because if I don't have that better path forward, I start to fixate on the past. And now I'm stuck in the past and I'm just trying to recreate it over and over again because I think that's the best I can do. So we keep expanding and then we get out of the binary thinking. It's not all or none. It's not success and failure. And a good reframe for failure is it's either we win or we learn. We get to this place of like, well, this didn't work out the way I wanted it to. I can unpack it and I can learn about it. There's lessons in there to extract, and that's how I'm actually going to improve. So they're really, we could technically get rid of the word failure altogether. Failure is almost, it happened once and I just gave up and I never tried it again. But if I stick with something, there's always things to learn from it every step of the way. We start to see these other possibilities when we have this expanded thinking, which is expanding the timeline as well. I'm not expecting things to happen overnight. I'm not expecting immediate success. I have this process-oriented timeline where every day I put time and energy and focus into this, and I'm working to develop it to get better and better. I keep looking forward to what can I improve upon. And as I do that, I'm going to be faced with my past. I'm going to be faced with the limitations I've placed on myself. We want to unpack and let go of that stuff because that's what holds us back. That's really the basis of this entire podcast is every time I go to move forward, there's going to be something from my past that's going to be in conflict with this brighter future. And so I need to do that work to unhook that and let that go, because if not, it's going to be playing in the background and it's going to be sabotaging what I want. We want to address that stuff, and we can use willpower. We can get stronger, but it also is a lot easier if we just let go of the things that are wounded within us, where now I can move forward with ease rather than having to struggle
Right.
and force myself. The expanded thinking, it's depersonalizing things. It's creating more and more space to allow for more possibilities. Then we start to ask the question, what would I prefer to experience? If our mindset is kind of frames up how we're functioning and seeing reality, if I want to see better outcomes, like I want to start to line my mind up with that. So what does this person I want to become, what thoughts would they have? What beliefs would they have? All that kind of stuff. We're almost like expanding our identity into the future of what do I need to line up with? How do I need to carry myself? How do I need to go about my business in order to get there? That's going to be me really detaching from the present. The work's happening in the present, but for my present being a product of my past, I'm unhooking that stuff. This is who you are. This is all you're going to be. There's no way to get better here. You're going to stay stuck and struggle forever. That's that survival thinking talking. We have to let that stuff roll through us. We want to feel it because at one point you really did feel that way, but most of these things aren't true anymore. We have these conversations all the time. This is the way things were for you for a long time, but it doesn't have to be that way anymore. And there's actually quite a bit of evidence going on currently that would disprove all this stuff, right?
Right.
At the end of the day, we're trying to integrate this self-compassion. We do that by removing the shame and the guilt and the stuff from our past that keeps us stuck in the negative emotion, the negative narratives about ourselves. So self-compassion, self-love, that can kind of be a little bit corny when people use that, but that's what we're after, is just I was doing the best I could with where I was at and what I knew. We all make mistakes, and that's actually how you learn and grow. So I have to make mistakes in order to better myself. I have to fail in order fail.
Yeah.
Failure is learning. I needed that to feel the pain from my past so that I can let it go and I can get lighter and I can move forward stronger. It's just this integration constantly of where am I heading and what's stopping me from my past. I want to let that stuff go. I want to learn about it. And now I can take steps forward much easier.
So, in that idea of integrating and moving past this, how would we know when we've moved from reacting to something to actually responding to it?
So a reaction is basically there's literally an impulse that runs through us that pushes us. That's going to be charged with generally negative energy. It's a wound got activated, and now I have a reaction to it. So reaction, if you break the word down, it's to act again. So it's something we've already learned how to do. It's a coping mechanism to protect ourselves from our past. So a reaction is simply, I'm just doing what I learned how to do. That's a little bit of what you're talking about before. It's like, oh, this is the way I've always done it.
Right.
And so the way I've always done it, it got me these results. If I want different results, I need to be more conscious. That's where we interrupt things with our conscious mind, meaning I might have the reaction, I might feel the impulse within me, but then I stop myself. I don't move forward with that. That's going to feel uncomfortable, but then I'm going to question, why am I feeling this way? What's going on here? Why do I want to react? Why am I angry, or why am I sad, or whatever it is? We start to question it. And with the conscious mind, then we start to build this filter of, these are the things I'm building. These are the things I want. These are my priorities in life. And so that actually starts to like be my filter for how I respond to things. I'm wanting to become this type of person. And so I need to stop the impulses, and I need to slow down, and I need to align with what I want. That's what the responding is. We're interrupting the reaction with our conscious mind. We're gaining control, self-control. And every time I do that, the impulses get less and less because I'm not reinforcing them. I'm reinforcing them with the repeated action. So if I stop doing that, and I'm like, no, that's no longer how I do things, I realign. Now I stop giving energy to the past now. I start channeling it to my future. That's really that process. So the more we do that, the impulses get less and less, and then it just feels pretty natural to align with the new way of being. Have you noticed that in any specific instances where, maybe it used to be reactive to something, but now it's just kind of like, oh, there's not much to that anymore.
Yeah, thinking in terms of getting better, I think I've noticed a change in that. There's less sort of desire. This has not completely gone away though. There's less desire to just change something. I think that was a reaction I often had. If I was super stressed, I would feel like I needed to change something. And that often showed up like major home remodels, for example, or wanting to move, or I don't know, something like that. It has not completely gone away. It still does come up for me, but it is a ton better than it used to be, where actually I can stop myself in the moment of stress where I'm like, ooh, it might be a good idea to, I don't know, tear down this wall and do something different, and be like, wait a second, is that really what I
Yeah.
want to do?
So it's just, I would say it's like taking time to be with something. I think many of us do get very action oriented, and action's great as long as you're aligned. But if my actions are just reactions, then I'm going to be operating in a very predictable pattern where I might be acting on things that are very old that don't really make sense for my life anymore. It's this ability to have the impulse to act and then actually to be able to sit with it, which is the opposite of action, and consider this future. What do I actually need to align with? How do I need to behave? What adjustments do I need to make? You stop feeding the pain part of it, and then you just gain this. It's self-control, but then it's also like feeling more empowered and being, oh, I actually get to make choices now rather than just reacting out of my pain. And conscious choices are generally designed to align with the person we're becoming, not with simply what's happened to us. Ultimately, we want to just hold some nuance to situations. That's what gives us freedom, flexibility, possibility. Is we got to stay out of the polarizing, and it's natural to go there once in a while, and we just want to create some awareness of when we are polarized, because we're probably not going to be very rational. We're not going to be very level-headed in that place. And those aren't like good places to take a lot of action either. We want to be very intentional about the actions we're taking. And that's going to be coming from, if I'm in survival temporarily, I want to move through the emotions, I want to move through the mindset. They always say, like, don't make a decision in anger or whatever it is. It's like that kind of stuff. Generally, from that place, sometimes we don't even need to do anything. Sometimes the problem takes care of itself, but then other times we'll have like a more specific action to take. And so survival, it's just these wounds from our past that it plugs us into. It could be physical needs, but then oftentimes it's more emotional based needs that weren't properly met, and we have some pain around that. And so it's just getting curious about what we feel and why we feel that way, and is there something I can do differently about it now? So if you want to go deeper with me, you can visit my website. It's brandonthilk.com. I have a group program called the Lightning Lab. So we do 2 sessions a month of teaching and 1 session a month for Q&A. And then there's also a community chat and weekly exercises. So if you're looking to go a little bit deeper, that's a good place to start. Also, if you're curious about one-to-one coaching, you can book a strategy session with me through my website. And also, if you want to follow me at Evolved Athlete on Instagram, I post there daily. So thanks for joining us today. This was a good one.
Yeah. We'll make sure all the links that Brandon mentioned there are in the show notes or the YouTube description if you're watching this on YouTube, so you can find that stuff easily.
All right, sounds good. Well, we'll see you guys next week.